Hello, my name is Jaden and I'm a digital artist and art educator. If you're new to my channel, I make content about the animation industry and how to go about pursuing animation as a career path. My channel features portfolio tips, advice based on my own personal experiences as an artist, interviews with industry professionals, and much more. So if that all sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can stay tuned for my future videos. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to conceptualize your ideas for an original animated series and compile it into what's known as a pitch Bible. For anybody hearing the term pitch Bible or pitch deck for the very first time, you might be wondering what that is. And to put it simply, a pitch Bible explains your story's premise, characters, and world in a detailed yet concise way. This can be done in the form of a PDF or a slideshow presentation, but it's usually accompanied by visuals and something to kind of have playing in the background while you give a verbal pitch of what your story is about. I'm going in depth in explaining each component that your pitch Bible will need, from characters to story, world building, and even a couple of potential episode ideas. I've included the timestamps in the description down below, so if there's any specific part of the pitch Bible you're curious to learn about, you can go ahead and skip around. So let's jump right into it. The first thing that you're always going to kick off your pitch with is your log line, a brief 1 to 2 sentence description of what your story is all about. An exercise that I like to practice to help me writing my logline is to browse my favorite streaming service and check out the descriptions of a new show that I might possibly want to check out. For demonstrative purposes, I'll use the Owl House as an example. Accidentally sent to the world of the Boiling Isles before a trip to summer camp, a teenage human named Luce longs to become a witch, with the rebellious Ida and the pint-sized demon king at her aid. Within those 2 brief sentences of your logline, we should be getting a sense of the who, what, and why of your story, which in this case, the who would be Luz, Ida, and King as our main protagonist and supporting characters. The what, or the character's main goal, is to become a witch, and the why would be she was originally supposed to go to a summer camp, but instead she stumbled upon this magical world. Not only does this logline effectively answer those story questions, but it also gives us a sense of the genre, which is a fantasy adventure with coming-of-age themes. Once you get to your synopsis, that'll be your chance to elaborate on your logline and give us a couple more sentences of what your story's about. Along with the logline and synopsis at the beginning of your pitch, you should also be mentioning the format and style in which you envision your series to be right from the get-go. Is it going to be 11-minute episodes with an A story and a B story within a half hour? Or is it going to be a full 22-minute episode that takes up the whole half hour? Is it serialized or episodic? Meaning, do the episodes continue off one another for an overarching plot? Or is each episode a self-contained story that kind of gives the characters a hard reset and can be watched in any particular order? Will it be in 2D, 3D, CGI, stop motion? Think of the animation style that you have in mind. And of course, don't forget to mention your target audience, which is the perfect segue into the next component of our pitch Bible, establishing the tone of your story. What's the feeling or atmosphere you're trying to convey? Is it fun and lighthearted, or is it gritty and dark? Even the use of color palettes can be a way to set the tone of your story from a visual standpoint, especially if you're somebody who doesn't consider yourself to be much of an artist or you don't have those draftsmanship skills. Using imagery from pre-existing shows will not only show where you drew your inspiration from, but it'll help paint a picture to the people you're pitching to. Of course, if you're going to be using other artists' work or images you find on the internet, be absolutely sure to credit all of your sources. As long as you're not trying to pass off somebody else's work as your own, this won't be frowned upon. Always remember that even though every idea in the universe has pretty much been done, it's all about taking elements from pre-existing things and putting your own personal spin on it to make it refreshing and new. Backpedaling to the topic of your target audience, there are different age ratings established by TV guidelines, ranging from TVY for all children, TVY7, directed towards older children, which this is usually that 6 to 11 demographic. TVY7FV, rated for fantasy violence. G for general audiences. PG, which is parental guidance suggested. TV14, which borders on the young adult demographic, teenagers ages about 14 to 17, which for some reason is considered this like non-existent gray area of a TV rating, but that's something that is slowly changing. And lastly, TVMA, which is of course mature audiences only. Depending on which demographic you're aiming your story towards, there are certain topics that you just can't really touch up on. However, the core story doesn't necessarily dictate what's considered kid-friendly or not. You can add or remove things to make it go either way. There's a popular term currently being used called co-viewing, which pertains to shows that have moments for all ages, but sometimes can contain jokes that adults will get, but completely fly over a kid's head.
Do something! Like what? Like drop some F-bombs!
Hey man, whoa, let's keep it PG.
No, Falcon bombs!
When pitching your idea, typically there is an executive that oversees each demographic within a studio or streaming service. Every studio has its unique style, voice, and brand. Be mindful of your audience, not only in the sense of who your show is going to cater to, but also who you're selling it to. For now, let's move on to the next component of our pitch Bible, and personally my favorite part, characters. It has been proven time and time again that character-driven stories are king. Because at the end of the day, viewers develop relationships with the characters, not the plot. And audience engagement honestly is going to depend on how relatable your characters are and understanding their motives. If the character isn't compelling enough to gauge their interest, they're not going to care about this character or whether or not they reach their goal. That's where you, the creator, comes in. It's your job to make the audience care. The protagonist should be proactive in trying to reach their goal, and each scene should move an emotional arc or plot forward. Viewers want to get new information from each scene. So ask yourself, does this character have a compelling catalyst? Is it a call to action, a tragic past, or standing up to a bully? What's their moral compass? Is it fighting for the greater good, discovering a hard truth, or seeking vengeance? Is their transformation or development believable? Are there obstacles that challenge their growth as an individual? And what kind of traits do they have, or characteristics that make up their personality? Is your protagonist hot-headed with a heart of gold, or narcissistic and doesn't work well with others? Also consider your character's dynamics. How do they foil one another and contribute to each other's development? Do they have the same common goals but for different intentions? Is there an ensemble of characters? And if so, how do they compete with one another? How is the supporting character's key relationship to the protagonist? And how do these characters react to the situations they're in and the world around them? Which brings us into our next component of the Pitch Bible, world building. When it comes to creating your world, start to think about the laws of this universe and how they apply to the characters navigating within it. One example I like to use is the Fairly Odd Parents. In the world of this show, fairies exist, and their purpose is to enrich a child's life. With the ability to have unlimited wishes and wish for pretty much anything comes with a lot of responsibility, so some rules need to be set in place to put limitations to these wishes. The rules sets the guidelines for what wishes fairies can and cannot grant. For example, a kid can't wish to keep their fairies forever. Why? Because once a fairy has fulfilled its duty, they need to move on to the next child in need. Keeping the fairy forever would be selfish and unfair to other children who need one. Despite fairies being these all-powerful, magical creatures, there is a rhyme or reason to how their powers function within this world. When it comes to the location of this world, some questions to ask yourself are, is this based on a real place, or is it completely fictional, or is it a hybrid between the two?
All right, twerp. Time for bed, but it's only 6:04. on the East Coast. Bad!
Still using the Fairly Odd Parents as a case study, the town of Dimsdale is a fictional place, but it's based in California, which is a real state. But then you have other more fantastical stories like The Witcher or Game of Thrones that feature entire continents that are entirely made up. Which brings me to my next point on world building, the time period. When is your story taking place? If you plan on making your story a period piece, make sure to do extensive research on that time period for authenticity and accuracy's sake. You could even use certain historical events to drive the plot forward. But if you choose the opposite and decide to go the futuristic sci-fi route, think of the technological advancements and mythology of this world. What your character does as a profession can make the world around them feel more believable. In the case of Cosmo and Wanda, their job is to be Timmy's fairy godparents, and fulfilling his wishes serves as the main driving force of the story's plot. Now, the good news is, and this is something that I personally found to be a huge relief, is you don't really need to have every single nook and cranny of your world figured out right at the time of your pitch. As I mentioned earlier, characters should be your top priority. And world building is something that can be further explored in the later developmental stages of your pilot. Which brings us to the last component of our pitch Bible, the potential episodes. Now, you don't have to have an entire pilot script already finished and ready to go at the time of pitching, but I do strongly recommend having ideas for at least a handful of episodes, potentially for your first season. If you plan on creating a series with an overarching plot, it should more or less summarize the character's journey from beginning to end using major emotional plot points, spanning over a 3-act structure with a conflict and resolution. While cliffhangers are a great way to keep the audience on the edge of their seat and wanting to know what happens next, the conflict can't be left unresolved. So just be mindful of that. An episodic series is a totally different case because each episode will be self-contained. I recommend brainstorming as an exercise and coming up with an outline for your story if it's going to be serialized, and spitballing a couple of one-offs if it's going to be episodic. And this is the part I would spend the most amount of time brainstorming on because your first idea isn't always going to be your best, and your most recent idea certainly won't be your last. So it doesn't hurt to have the first season mapped out because it'll show that you have enough ideas to fuel your series. Now comes the question of the why. Why does this story need to be told? And why should you be the person qualified to tell it? Refer to your own personal experiences and mention why they resonate with you as a creator. So now that you've learned what a pitch Bible consists of, I encourage you to go ahead and get started in making your own. Hopefully this video inspired you and gave you some ideas for how to organize your story. If you found this video helpful, please remember to give it a thumbs up because it really helps my channel grow. I'll have examples of completed pitch Bibles linked in the description down below if you ever need to use it as a reference or guide. So make sure to check that out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!